Welcome to Encouraging Wellness, where we shed light on the plethora of holistic healing and wellness methods so you can give yourself the power to ask why and become bigger than the condition you are dealing with or the illness you are currently fighting. Join Pamela Wirth as she sits down with doctors, medical experts, healthcare practitioners, and those with unique healing stories to dissect groundbreaking practices that combine traditional Western medicine with alternative modalities. Hear conversations that empower you to go beyond hurtful stigmas, outdated practices, and unnecessary labels, guiding you towards a healthier and happier you. Here, we highlight your true worth and help unleash your inner courage. Now your host, Pamela.
Hi, this is Pamela Wirth with Hello Health Encouraging Wellness Podcast. And today I have Beth Lambert from Epidemic Answers. Beth has been instrumental in my own healing journey with my own family, and how a diagnosis is certainly not a case for permanence. And thank you, Beth, for being here. Beth is an author, educator, and former healthcare consultant. She's monitored and documented escalating rates of childhood chronic conditions for over a decade, which is just super incredible. Her first book, A Compromised Generation, was certainly very impactful for me in my learning in how everything is not permanent from when you get a diagnosis, and certainly not something that can't be undone, and certainly with a lot of work. But the book provides a thorough analysis of the origins of the modern health crisis, documents and how modifications to environmental and lifestyle can make a profound change in health, as well as full disease reversal, which was certainly the case in our experience. Beth is also co-author of Brain Under Attack, a resource for parents and caregivers of children with PANS, PANDAS, and autoimmune encephalitis. She's also founder and executive director of Epidemic Answers. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to reestablishing vibrant health in our children, which is crazy important. She's also the creator and executive producer of the Documenting Hope Project, which is a multi-year prospective research study and media project that examines the cumulative impact of environmental stressors on health and their mitigation through personalized and systems-based treatment approaches, which is very important. She's also the mother of 3 children and very passionate about raising awareness about the connection of our daily choices, human health, and planetary health. Beth, thank you so much for being here. If it weren't for A Compromised Generation, I never, ever would have known that the diagnosis that we had received, which was that we'd have to take care of our son the rest of our lives, could actually be reversed through changes in our environment, changes in our food. And so thank you so much for your brave journey and helping educate all of us. And welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you. And I'm so happy to hear that book had an impact, because that was the point. That was why I wrote it, is I wanted to wake people up to the fact that there's more we can do for our kids, because oftentimes we're given sort of the, determinist, genetic determinism, like, oh, they're, just born this way. This is the way they're going to be. Or in the case of PANS and PANDAS, like, we don't know what the heck is going on. And that's not true. It's just that, a lot of times the clinicians that we work with just aren't educated as to what's going on. They just don't know yet. It wasn't part of their training. So I'm glad that, it was helpful to you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into all of this? What did that look like?
Well, it started when I became a parent, and I was, around a lot of other parents who had young children. And I sort of started slowly kind of waking up to something was off, and you get that gut instinct that like something isn't right here. So I'd be like around other, baby play groups or toddlers or things like that. And I would see a lot of GERD, a lot of eczema, GERD being like the reflux that babies get. A lot of parents would be like, oh, we have 7, 10, 12 stools a day. Like, and then the behavioral stuff starts emerging, right? Like all of a sudden people with young children are getting autism diagnoses. And it's kind of this experience where you're like, something is not right here. And in my own children, I saw some issues as well. So I, really clued into what was going on. And started looking for reasons or rationales, or why is this happening? So that's where I decided to dig deeper, and I started writing the book and researching for the book to better understand what was contributing to all of these symptoms and diagnoses in, my kids and sort of the peer group around me.
So do you have a medical background?
No, I had worked in I was in healthcare consulting,
Uh-huh.
and I had done a lot of work for pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, and so had sort of that perspective. So I was very well versed in doing medical research, but it was that was actually really important for me to leverage that when I was doing research for my own book. I would call physicians and would be fluent in the language. As I was doing my research, I could jump onto PubMed, which is where you do all your medical research, and was fluent in that. So I didn't have a formalized medical training, but I had enough facility with the information that I could, really ask good questions and dig a little bit more and understand what was happening a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's super. My background is more in problem solving and data and analysis. And so for me, what I found with the doctors was I would digest a lot of information and then present it to the doctors and start asking questions like, why is it possible? And because I found that some doctors were open to this and some doctors were not. And then it was through the book that it started to make sense. And for me, it was really a deep dive into inflammation and what causes inflammation and how to reduce inflammation. And it's just it's been an incredible journey. So tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you're doing now and some of the research that you're doing, anywhere that you need help or anywhere that you're starting to see some major progression.
Yeah. So I run a nonprofit organization they started over 10 years ago called Epidemic Answers. And the purpose of Epidemic Answers is to help support parents as they are, kind of waking up to what's happening to their children in terms of understanding the environmental factors that contribute to symptoms and diagnoses, but also in terms of helping them find the path forward and how to do some of the healing and recovery work. So Epidemic Answers is always doing educational programming and trying to provide connectivity to different clinicians. So trying to connect parents to different practitioners who do this kind of work. We have a practitioner directory. We train health coaches so that health coaches can help families who need an education and support in making lifestyle changes and diet changes, et cetera. And the other really important thing that Epidemic Answers does is it runs a research program called Documenting Hope. And Documenting Hope was a initiative that was started a number of years ago because we felt like, we were out there talking to parents and we knew that the environment was a major factor in why we're seeing escalating rates of chronic health and developmental conditions in children. But, people kept saying things like, well, there isn't enough evidence to support that. And we knew that wasn't true. There's plenty of evidence out there. It's just that people hadn't pulled it together yet in the right way or the meaningful way. So we actually decided to begin raising money and doing our own independent research. So we now have 2 IRB approved research studies under the title of the Documenting Hope Project. Mm-hmm. And the first research study is a study called CHIRP. And it's an online survey that's HIPAA compliant and private. And it is the most comprehensive environmental health survey that's ever been done in children. And we ask parents to participate in the study so we can learn, what their family is eating, what kinds of things they're exposed to, what's the medical history of the child, so we can correlate those things with health symptoms and health diagnoses. So the CHIRP study's been running since 2018. And we're seeing all kinds of interesting data coming out of that study. And it's still ongoing and parents can still participate in it. And the more parents we get to participate, the better understanding we have about what are those things in and around our environment that are impacting our children's health. And we need to do a better job of understanding that. So that's why we decided to do the science on our own. The second study we have is called the FLIGHT study. And that study is a longitudinal study, meaning it's over time, where we're taking a small group of children who have a chronic health condition or developmental condition, and we're giving them essentially what amounts to a very structured healing program over 18 months, where we're working with a series of local clinicians near the family, each family, And we're basically doing a deep dive on each child and doing the most comprehensive workup you can imagine in terms of understanding what the root causes are for this particular child. So our flight study hopes to enroll 14 children over multiple years. It's a multi-year study. We have our first child enrolled, which is very exciting. It's a momentous occasion for us. This is a 4-year-old child who has autism spectrum disorder. They live in Northern Virginia, and we're recruiting 2 more families currently in Northern Virginia. So, the families who participate in the study will receive basically free healthcare, free access to diagnostic laboratory tests that are, the boutique ones that really get at the comprehensiveness of what's going on in a body. And then they'll also get free healing support with practitioners and supplements and whatever it is that they need as a bio individual. So that study, it will also be documented on film. So we actually are working with a production company called Earth Conscious Films and a director named Rob Herring, and he's going to be coming in and basically telling the story of the families who are enrolled in our program. So the reason why we're doing this, including a filming component, is because we want to share with the world how healing happens. So it's, imagine basically like, I've been documenting stories of recoveries, and just like yours and in your book. And I've been documenting that for over 10 years and having these incredible, inspiring stories of hope. But now what we're doing is we're literally trying to recreate those incredible stories of hope and then documenting it scientifically. So people can't say anymore, oh, well, it's just an anecdote, or maybe your son didn't have that to begin with, or maybe your daughter's diagnosis was wrong, whatever it is. We want to say, no, this is actually what's happening. They get a diagnosis. It's because their body's out of balance. And then this program is trying to reestablish that balance. And then hopefully what we intend to see will be the lifting of the symptoms, the lifting of the diagnoses. And if we capture it on film, it's an easier story to tell to the public, because no one's going to sit through and look at our, go through PubMed and read our published, peer-reviewed literature on, these case studies. They're going to want to see the story. So that's really important to us, that we merge the science and the media, because we feel like, these are our kids. We don't have time to wait, the requisite 20 or 30 years from the science to go from bench to bedside. Yeah. So we want to bring it directly to parents as soon as we can, which is why we're doing the film portion.
No, that's super. So who are some of your top mentors through this whole process? I mean, we don't get anywhere without tons of amazing people around us. Who's really been some of your saviors as you've been?
I would say personally, I had a lot of mentors who were in books. So I think I started this journey by following Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride and the gut and psychology syndrome. And also I, read a lot of Mark Hyman, who writes a lot about functional medicine. And then, after sort of I did my academic, reading and following these authors, I started meeting people, doctors who were doing this work and parents who had already kind of recovered their kids. And one of the people I actually met was Patricia Lemmer, who was the author of, or is the author of Outsmarting Autism. And she also wrote another book on vision and autism and developmental conditions. She was a big mentor for me, sort of learning about all the pieces that you need to address when you're healing children. I've really respected and admired Julie Matthews, who focuses on nutrition as a bio individual. So many mentors like that are actually clinicians, different integrative physicians. And there's so many now out there actually doing this work. But when I started over 10 years ago, there were very few integrative physicians who were taking a holistic or whole body or integrative type approach to things like autism or ADHD. And now for parents, it's so much easier to find one of these clinicians because there's so many more that have been trained. And that's so encouraging. It's really heading in the right direction. I think the next thing we need as a society is to figure out how to get these things paid for, because so much of this work is not accessible to people because it's not covered by insurance. And, sometimes these physicians are very expensive, or the lab tests are very expensive. So that's a barrier that we still need to overcome.
Do you find that there's a certain amount of time that it takes to start to see changes and improvements. And I know for us, it was almost a year. And we had been told from the beginning, look, you're just going to have to be patient, stay the course, and trust that it's not fast. Do you
Right.
see some things like that, or anything that's kind of a particular trend? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for some families, they'll see, instant transformation like overnight because they took a major trigger out of their child's life, like a major something that was causing inflammation. So like sometimes parents will take like wheat and dairy out of their child's diet, and then all of a sudden they start speaking the next day. I have absolutely talked to parents whose experience was that. Or another one is people who start glutamate free diet. They see transformations easily. Those are sort of like the signal that, this was really bothering your child, but usually that doesn't result in sort of long-term lasting healing. What you just described about taking about a year, that's very common and very typical. And I do think that it's important for people who are embarking on a healing journey to put into context that the body didn't snap overnight, just, develop whatever chronic condition or developmental condition that their child has. It developed over time, and it literally starts preconception, and it's a cumulative effect, and then in utero there's all these impacts, and then in the infant years, neonatal and infant years, all these things kind of add up, all the stressors that are making the body vulnerable. So if you imagine that these things are adding up over time, it takes that same kind of amount of time or more to unwind all of those things, right? And healing oftentimes happens, people describe it like layers of an onion. So sometimes you take the biggest stressors off, like the wheat and dairy, or maybe it's some toxins in the environment, or mold is another, one of those really big stressors. You take that off and it can make a big impact. But usually to get to the body into a state of resilience when it can really tolerate more stressors, that takes time. And that's true for anyone. It's just the human body is like, it needs to sort of itself out. It needs to work through whatever it needs to work through. And that isn't overnight. So as you said, somebody giving you advice just to stay the course and just be patient, I think that's really sage advice.
yeah. So if obviously you do a lot of work with kids, do you find that in that you hear a lot of stories from the parents and from other siblings that are potentially older or adults, or I would imagine that some of this has some positive effects on adult life too? As you're making changes for your kids, you probably make changes for yourself too. And have you gotten any feedback like that?
Usually the best case scenarios, like the best stories you hear about, the best outcomes, are families that went all in together.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some families who are trying to manage their child's diagnosis by just, making diet changes, for instance, for just the child that has a diagnosis, and there's 2 other kids in the house, or another, sibling, and that sibling doesn't make any changes. It's so hard for that individual child if they're eating gluten-free, for instance, and everybody else is not, or like, family with a child with diabetes, and that child has a special diet, but everybody else doesn't. When the whole family goes in, the reason to make these changes are to improve the health of that individual child. But if the whole family goes in, those benefits are going to, hit the whole family. So, you hear parents of who are working on their child with autism, and the depression lifts for mom, and the anxiety lifts for dad, and dad drops 40 pounds, and his, hemoglobin A1C is down into the normal range, or, these things are part of what happens. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, I really personally, on a spiritual level, feel like our kids came into this world to show us something. Right, that we are all sick. We're sort of abusing the environment. We're not respecting nature. We're not in alignment with nature. And these kids came in to be like, hey, you can either wake up to this, or you can just, continue to struggle. Which path do you want? Yeah. And I feel like eternal gratitude to this generation of kids, which is now becoming multi-generations of kids who've come in with these symptoms to wake us up. And the families that, are like, wow, and really accept that, everybody does better. And that to me is what it's about. Like, thank you. These kids were supposed to deliver this message to us. And when our health improves because we all make these changes, that's what they're here for.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I believe this all happened to me for a reason. So here I am sharing the message. So just kind of final thoughts, if people are going through some struggling health challenges, do you have any particular suggestions, thoughts, websites, things to do? Obviously, you mentioned a few of your mentors and their work. Anything particular in terms of, a couple of things to just really look out for and do?
Yeah, well, there's one concept that I think is profoundly helpful for readying yourself to tackle this problem or to head out on this journey. So if you're a parent who's just starting this, the term is total load. And that's a term that was coined by one of my mentors, Patricia Lemmer, and she used it to apply to children with autism. It's a term that has been used sort of in the integrative medicine, holistic world for a while, and it's more commonly you hear total body burden is kind of another way of talking about it. But I love the concept because it's sort of a unifying way to look at what's happening to our bodies. So what total load is this concept that your body's like only can handle so much in terms of stressors, whether those are toxic stressors, whether those are emotional stressors, whether that's imbalances and different kinds of things you don't even know about, like you have too much EMF exposure, electromagnetic radiation. So if your body's under too much stress, then it begins to kind of break down and express symptoms. So one of the corollary to the total load theory is that you can actually do a lot to build your body's capacity to deal with all those stressors. So you can build resilience through sleep, through nutrition, through good microbes in your gut, through getting natural sunlight and living in rhythm with nature. So I love this total load concept because it's basically, it simplifies everything, which is take as many stressors out of your life as possible. Again, toxic stressors, it could be, preservatives in food, it could be EMF, it could be, chemicals in your lotions and shampoos. Take those stressors out and then try and build your body back up through supports, what you would call health supports, nutrition, sleep, sunlight, etc. It's like almost like a simple equation. It's almost formulaic. If you have symptoms, remove stressors. So like, I like to think about it. If you have allergies, yes, you're going to try and remove the allergen if it's dust mites or pollen or what have you. But if you take chemicals out of your body, in your cleaners and your personal care products, that's actually going to help your allergies, even though you're not allergic to the cleaners or you're not allergic to the chemicals. When you take the chemicals out of your body becomes less reactive to the allergens. Yeah. So again, that concept, is like a really great takeaway because it gives you something to do. Like, what today can I do to reduce my total load? What stressors can I take out? And what can I do to support my body? It's like that equation. So that's the main takeaway. And then I would also say that we have so many resources on the Epidemic Answers website. So epidemicanswers.org and documentinghope.com. We have tons of recovery stories. We have free webinars. I mean, we have almost 100 webinars where these experts have come on. I still can't believe we've gotten some of the great experts that we have, but they share their knowledge and wisdom for free because they're like you and I, they care about getting the word out and they want to help parents. So I really encourage people to come check out the resources. We have practitioners and health coaches and other kinds of things that can be helpful on the journey. So that's sort of my key advice is check out some of the resources that we have on those websites.
That's super. Thank you so much, Beth. It's really a pleasure to have you on. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and helping so many people.
My pleasure. I always love to talk about this stuff.
Thank you. Take care.
That's it for this episode of Encouraging Wellness. We hope this serves as an eye-opener to you on new ways to approach your health and wellness. By learning both unique and the best alternative wellness and healing methods, you can live your best life. Listen to more of our episodes at www.hello.health. Be sure to subscribe to the show and leave a rating. Together, let us work towards unlocking you and your family's best self. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.